Yes, and this is it. Thank you, guys. Hope you will love it.
Yeah, thanks, Diana, and thanks a lot for inviting me today for the first Code for Ukraine event. I believe we are here because we want to support Ukrainian families and at the same time to learn something useful, maybe for your next pet project or your next like work-related tasks. So yeah, let's get started. So we'll talk today about Azure Databricks Development Flow. And before that, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Margaryta Ostapchuk. I work at Microsoft. Actually, I joined Microsoft 8 years ago. I joined Microsoft Office in Kiev 8 years ago, and 5 years ago, I moved to Canada. And now I'm part of commercial software engineering team. So last year, I was working with companies, partners from media and communication industries. This year, I work with financial services industry, like partners and customers, like our top accounts. And I'm senior software engineer. Like my main focus areas, it's machine learning, data, and DevOps. So like my recent projects were about building data platforms, ETL pipelines, machine learning, natural language understanding model, and making sure we have solid and implemented solid DevOps best practices. So it's a little bit about me. So now let's talk about our agenda for today. So today we will talk about Databricks, and I work with Azure often, like every day, right? So I will talk about Databricks in Azure and how to provision Azure Databricks resources. After that, we will talk about Databricks repos for Git integration, local development on your like local PC with Visual Studio Code, and how to connect Databricks in Azure to other Azure services like data stores and etc. And after that, we will also discuss CI/CD with Azure DevOps. So this is the agenda that we shared earlier. Also, I want to set some additional expectations. So first, I will go through the slides. So I have some slides prepared for you. Then I switch to the Azure portal and the Visual Studio Code, and we will review everything like I mentioned, also including some code in Python and some YAML pipelines. And after that, if you will have questions, I will be happy to answer the questions. So now let's talk a little bit more about Azure Databricks and why actually I wanted to talk to you about this topic today. So every business today wants to leverage data to drive strategic initiatives with machine learning, data science, analytics, right? But usually companies run into the challenges like proprietary technologies or unreliable data, or like some engineers can like work in silos. So this is some like big issues. And that's why like I wanted to talk today about Azure Databricks. So it's a jointly developed data and AI service from Databricks and Microsoft for data engineering, data science, also for data analytics and machine learning. So Azure Databricks is optimized for Azure with integration to provide like one-click setup and an interactive workspace that enable collaboration among data scientists, data engineers, business analysts, etc. Right? And at the same time, it's a collaborative platform, and you can securely integrate your code with other existing services in the cloud. So you can connect and integrate with multiple data services. You can show like end-to-end analytics and machine learning pipelines and integrated management with other services as well. So now let's talk about the first topic about, let's talk about Azure Databricks resources. But first, please raise your hands if you're familiar with Azure. Have you ever used Azure before? Okay, awesome. Yes, thanks. So I see like half of the audience use. Thanks a lot. And now, how many of you use Databricks before? Great. So yeah, thanks a lot for the answers. It will help me to share or maybe skip some additional details that I wanted to share. So now let's move to the next slide. So this is like, if you're familiar with Azure, this is a portal where you actually can create resources. And this is a resource that we want to create, Azure Databricks, right? So it's a Apache Spark-based analytic platform. And you can see here that this is an offer, right? But it's not Azure Marketplace offer, but it's rather fully integrated into Azure with the ability to spin up Azure Databricks in the same way that you would spin up like virtual machine in the cloud, right? So like this is how you can find this offer, and we will create this offer in Azure. So you need to provide for this resource group, workspace name, also region. For example, it can be like West Europe, Central US, etc., and different pricing tiers. For example, currently we have like standard and premium, but like you can also try it for free for 14 days with the premium offer. There is some also other advanced settings, like you can add Azure Databricks workspace into your virtual private network. After that, when we created the resource in the Azure portal, we'll go to the Databricks workspace that you created, and then we launch the workspace. So this is what you will see after that. So this is a collaborative like environment, and like one platform to run different types of analytic workloads, whether you're like data scientists or like engineers. And like you can see like one notification here is that it actually suggests immediately to create a cluster. So like, why do we need a cluster? We need a cluster to run some analytical analytics or like some jobs like notebooks, right? So this is our compute that workspace suggests us to create to run our workloads. So you can like set it up, configure, fine tune to establish this reliability and the certain level of performance without need for like additional like monitoring, etc. So it's like simplify the process for you. And also in this workspace, you can see like other things here. This is like the workspaces, repos. You can also set up clusters, explore your notebooks, etc. So once we're done with the workspace, we can create like finally our cluster. So this is the UI for cluster creation. And when you create a new cluster, you can specify the type of cluster, and you can specify your Databricks runtime version. So there are different runtimes, and it's like some of them you can like specify, for example, Spark version, you want the most recent one, or you want the one that you use before, like, and you want some comparability there. And after that, you also have different runtimes. Some of those runtimes are actually optimized for machine learning workloads, so you can choose those. And you can terminate your cluster. You can choose the time that the cluster will be auto-terminated. So for example, in my case, it's like 2 hours, but 2 hours of inactivity, but you can choose your own. There is like different type of workers, and the workers is basically the type of like machine that you will run your compute workloads on. And you can specify the minimum number of workers and maximum number of workers, so you can scale up to like hundreds of workers there. And you can specify the driver type. Also, there are like some advanced options for cluster creation, like you can specify environment variables, a different Spark configuration you can add here, and at the same time you can add init script. So like with the init script, you can initialize your cluster while it's creating, like setting up, so that additional script can install something additional that you need to run your like notebooks and jobs. So this is a little bit about the cluster. So like each cluster can be attached to the notebook. So to run the notebook in the environment, you need to like attach this to your cluster. You can see the state from the UI that it's like running, terminated, etc. And also it has a visualization of your Spark jobs. So you can go to the UI, explore logs, and also install different libraries on the cluster. So for example, like Maven libraries, etc., and look for like metrics. So there are a lot of configurations that you can do, but this is basically it. So like right now we covered the first topic. So we review the Azure resources and like how you actually can get started with Databricks in Azure. Our second topic for today is Databricks repos for Git integration. Before that, let's see what do we have here. So yeah, I just opened the. I see that someone shared the question. I will answer the questions later on. So now we'll talk about Databricks repos for Git integration. So this is like our workspace, and there are a couple of things that you can do, right? Like you can use data, we just use compute to create our clusters. We also can use repos, and this is like what we will do in this case for our Git integration. So in the repos here, you can see that we can add a new repo to like our like user folder. So every user who added to the workspace will have her like their own folder here. So this is, for example, my folder, and I can add a repo. There is multiple options. This is the like options. For example, you can add GitHub repo, Azure DevOps repo, GitLab, Bitbucket, etc. And you can use that repo from the workspace. After that, you can see here that in this case, I specify my GitHub repo. And in this GitHub repo, you can see that I can just clone the repo and add the repo URL. But before actually it will get added, I need to do some additional setup, and I need to do this through user settings and Git integration. So in the user settings, I can specify Git provider with a username and email, and I also need to generate a pod token. So pod token is personal access token that help you to make sure that you had enough access to actually get the repo to your Databricks workspace. So in this case, like in different like tools, and you can generate this token in a different way. But for example, in this demo, I will use GitHub. So you can generate the token under development settings. You can specify the name of your token or like the purpose for your token, and you need to select scope repo for that, and then enable the Git integration. There is a couple of things here that I want to mention, that there are like two different options. So the first one, you can connect only to your notebooks, but there is also option to connect and see all the files that are available in your repo. So you can see notebooks or the whole repo, and the whole repo is other type of files than notebook are currently in preview based on like the documentation, but yeah, like it's also possible, and we'll need to enable that and see like all files in the repo for our next step. Once we added our repo, now we can actually from the workspace change the branch and make commits, and actually even got redirected to the pull request that we created. So our next step here, so now we have this, let's imagine like repo, and we want to create new notebook. So what is notebook? Notebook, it's a web-based interface to documents that contain runnable commands, visualization, and narrative text. So you can actually create a notebook with your code there and attach that notebook later on to the cluster. So we will do that from the UI, and you have multiple options, for example, Python, Scala, SQL, R. And you specify that the name of the cluster that you want to attach then notebook to. After that, now we are ready to write our code since we created the notebook. So now let me switch to the code, and I will show you the code that we will use today for the demo purposes. So let me open my browser, and here I want to show you the Databricks environment. So this is the environment that we were talking to. This is my folder that I created, right? And the repo that I attached to my workspace, and this is the all files, not only notebook files, and I can go to the notebook demo and see what is inside actually my notebook. So this is the simple notebook for the demo purposes. So I leverage additional like module right here. So I generate data. So let me actually show you how I generate the data. So it's in this Python file, I create a data frame. So this is the functions that creates Spark data frame consisting of high and low temperatures by airport code and date. And I define the structure for that data frame and add new data to the data frame. So this is what I return as a result of this function execution data frame, right? And then I leverage this in the notebook itself. I generate data. Now I have this temps data, and now I can use actually Spark SQL to query this data. So first I create this demo temp table on my Databricks cluster. Currently, this cluster, you see that it's attached, but it's like terminated. So I'll need to start my cluster before I will run it. Currently, it's spinning up. And now I have this table, I query this table, and expect to see some results. So this is the first part of the code that we will work on. So I show you the code. So now let's talk about how to do local development with Visual Studio Code. Before that, I talk about how to write code in Databricks notebook, right? I show you Databricks notebook, and it was the Databricks not Databricks environment. So for the local development, I want to clone that code from my GitHub account and run it on my local machine, right? So to do that, first of all, for this demo, I leverage Visual Studio Code. Also, I install this Visual Studio Code extension that actually helps me with the Python language, includes some features such as IntelliSense, linting, debugging. Also, you can like select Python interpreter, code with code format and refactoring, variable explorer, etc. So first I install this, and after that, there is another package, Databricks Connect. So basically, you can also install Databricks Connect in your virtual environment, for example, and leverage this Databricks Connect to your Databricks cluster and run code from your local machine on cluster on Databricks. And before you will do the whole setup, you need to, once you install Databricks Connect, you need to configure Databricks Connect. So how you can configure it? You need to provide several parameters to configure. So first you write Databricks Connect configure, and after that you need to provide server hostname. So this is, you can get it from your cluster configuration. Also, you need to provide Databricks token. So you, as a user, you can generate access token under user settings. You also need your cluster ID. So there are two types of UI for the cluster. There is nice UI, and another one is JSON UI. So it's much easier to grab that cluster ID from JSON UI, and if you just get started, default port that Databricks Connect asks you to provide is 15001. So there is some additional setup required, but after that you can run Databricks Connect test. And once you run this command, you can see that this is a screenshot from Databricks that the job started, and this job started from my Dell PC. So currently I am on my Dell machine, right? And it's not started from Databricks, it started from my PC. So this is how you can actually connect from local machine. So I will show you this demo. So this is my code. I'm currently in the branch local development. I can configure, as I mentioned, right? For example, I can configure Databricks host here, and you can see that I already specify my Databricks host. So actually, I don't need to do that anymore. And if I want to run this notebook local from a local machine, I can start debugging this Python module, and it connect me to my cluster. So there is there are a couple of, it's running on stages, and you can see that the process has started, and we can actually will see the results of this job from our local machine. So this is kind of the same result that we expected to see, but not from the Databricks, but from the local machine. So when I click into in one of these logs, it redirects me to the Spark UI, and I can see that it starts running today, and the duration, and this is the job that started from my PC. So this is kind of how I can how I can run on my local machine, but at the same time leverage the cluster that is currently running and is a part of my Databricks setup. Okay, let's. Let's move on. Just give me a second. So let me switch to the slide now. So we review this part. Now I want to talk about connecting to data stores and other Azure services. So far, like we work with Databricks environment, and we work workspace, and we work with our local machine, right? But we haven't leveraged like any other external data sources. So in this part of my presentation, I want to talk about additional Azure resources. So first of all, about Azure Blob Storage and Azure Key Vault. So you can choose any data store from other like cloud providers as well. So, but just for the demo purposes, I use Azure Blob Storage because it's massively scalable, secure object storage for cloud native workloads, archives, data lakes, high performance computing, machine learning, etc. And also I leverage Azure Key Vault. So if you're not familiar, so Azure Key Vault is a cloud service that used to manage keys, secrets, and certificates. Key Vault eliminate the need for developers to store security information in the code, and also it allows you to centralize the storage of your application secrets with greatly reduced like chances that secrets may be leaked. And in addition, it also provides some additional logs of all access and usage attempts of your secrets, so you have a complete audit trail for compliance, for example. So this is the 3 services that I use for this demo. And in this, like you can see this in the portal. So this is the services that I will leverage now. So also in the storage, I create a blob container. So blob container, just like a folder, right? You can have like multiple containers in your storage account for like different purposes. For example, in one container, you want to write data, and to another container, you want to like read data from, etc. So I created blob container, and also I created secret in Key Vault. So basically, this is the secret that contain Key Vault blob. This is the secret that contain access key to my blob storage. And now this is the Databricks and Chamber of Secrets. So if you don't know like this URL, you will not find it from the UI. At least I couldn't. You can try. So like you kind of like need to add to your URL found secret / create scope to create scope that Databricks will leverage. There are like two options: Azure Databricks backed scope and Key Vault backed scope, right? So for the demo, I will show how to use Azure Key Vault backed scope. So to create the scope, you need to provide a DNS name of your Key Vault, and at the same time, you also need to provide a source ID. You can get it all this information from the Azure portal. So under the properties, you will see the resource ID. You can just copy and paste. And now let me switch back to the code. So here is the code. Let me switch my branch. So I have a little bit more like code here. So in this part of code, I mount blob storage. So I mount blob storage in a way that I provide like the source mount point, like so my mount point for me will be blob, right? The source will be the blob container that I created. And also I need to provide some extra configuration. So you can see here that extra configuration is actually the key that I created. And since I want to leverage Azure Key Vault backed scope secrets, I provide the name of the scope that I also created. In this way, I don't need to add secrets directly to my code, right? And use just scope. And basically, I write back the data that I generated as a result of running the script to my blob storage. So I can go to the blob container and see the results of the execution of that file. So you can see that now this like I refresh the portal and like my blob container, and now this file exists, and I have the data that got generated as a result of the execution here. So in this way, I leverage Key Vault and I write back to the container, but at the same time, it can be like millions of rows, like in the project that you actually leverage data. Azure Databricks can be like million of rows, gigabytes of data, right? And you can read and write kind of like both ways and leverage not only Azure storage, but other services like data, Azure SQL, Azure Data Lakes, etc., or like any other cloud storages or any other storages. Okay, so now we discussed how we connect to other storages and other services. So now let's talk about CI/CD with Azure DevOps. So this is the screenshot. Actually, I shared the link to the official documentation, and this is the best practices for integrating Databricks repos with CI/CD workflow. So we already discussed some of the steps. So the first step is for the user. So let's look at the user workflow first. So the first step for the user is to clone remote repository to user folder, right? After that, create a branch. We know that we can create a branch from Databricks. We can create and edit code from Databricks, and we can commit and push to the feature branch. So this is from the user perspective. We review that when we talk about Git integration. So when we talk about our Git provider, we have this merge workflow. So after we committed and push to feature branch, we create a pull request and review process. So this is, I believe, something that you're familiar with. We merge into main, and then we set up Git automation calls to Databricks repo API. So in this demo, I will leverage Databricks Repos 2.0 API to add that automation, and also we have the production job, but production workflow, we need to do some additional pre kind of setup to do that. So first of all, we will need to set up top level repos folder. For example, production. In our case, it will be development and staging. You can add as many stages as you want, and we will set up Git automation to update repos on merge. So to support like the best practices, we will make sure that these folders actually in sync with the remote Git repository, and when we feel comfortable, we will update our staging and development staging folder when we feel that we can kind of like move on with a new version of code. And with this production workflow, we will call the API, and this API I'll call brings repo in staging folder or production folder to the latest version, and run Databricks job based on the repo in staging or production folder. So to summarize, right, from the user perspective, we'll have this feature branch, for example, notebook blob. We will make change to the file, right? This is kind of like new feature. We will commit and push, create a pull request. So this is a view from, for example, GitHub. We will have the changes, create a pull request, and once it merged, we want to make sure that the changes from the kind of like user branch will update the development folder. And this is the development folder, for example, for development workloads, and this is a staging folder for the staging jobs, right? It can be some jobs or like notebooks, right? Jobs that's called a notebook that run on schedule, right? And this is something that we want to make sure that we up to date with the recent changes in main. So this is the top top level folders, non-user folders. And this is kind of like the most common use cases to create like dev, staging, and prod folders that contain Databricks repos. And an appropriate version of branches for development, staging, and production. So in this case, I will leverage main branch when I merge to like the main, the development folder will be updated with the changes in the branch, and the staging will also be updated with the most current changes in the mail, but like based on like the manual kind of process, because we don't want, but there are like multiple ways you can do that, but this is for the demo purposes, we will follow this path. So where is your code? For the demo, I will leverage Azure DevOps and Azure pipelines that will automatically build and test code project to make them and to make basically this code available for others and see results of the execution of your like CI and CD pipelines. So I choose option GitHub, but you also can leverage like any other like ways you can build like pipelines. I don't know. Like one of the most obvious choices will be like GitHub Actions, right? Like this is the way how you can integrate with Azure DevOps. Since my repo currently in GitHub, but yeah, let's go through the integration with Azure DevOps. And here I select the repo that I will use, and before I will move to the CI part, the one of the parts of the CI, right, can be running tests. And the one of the team, some of my colleagues actually created this Nutter testing framework for Databricks notebooks. So the Nutter framework makes it easy to test Databricks notebooks. The framework enables a simple inner dev loop and easily integrates, for example, with Azure DevOps. You can create, build, and release pipelines. And when data or ML engineer want to test the notebook, they simply can create a test notebook called test_notebook name, right? And Nutter has two main components. One is Nutter Runner, that is server-side component, and that is installed as a library on Databricks cluster. And another one is Nutter CLI, and this is basically the client CLI that you can actually install on agent, and this is what we will do in our pipeline. So now let's switch to the YAML. So for this purposes, I created pipelines, right? So the first pipeline, I specify some variables. I want to know if it's running on my branch or like feature branch or like in main. Define like branch name. I have a couple of steps. The first step is to make sure that the main the development folder is up to date with whatever code is in the main. I install Python versions that I use like locally, use on the cluster, and now I will use like the same version on the agent. And here I also install Nutter to run the test. And I also just make sure that I run this Nutter on in the correct kind of like folder in my Databricks environment, and publish the test result. Also, I believe it makes sense kind of like to show how the test look like. So this is the simple test for like our demo notebook. So in this case, I just count the number of rows in the data frame that I created. So this is one simple test. And I run this test as a part of the my CI pipeline. So when I open my pipelines from Azure DevOps, you can see that I have CI pipeline. I run it a couple of times, and you can see that the job run depends on like if it's run on like main or like my development branch. I skip some of the steps here. So I execute Nutter test, I publish test results, I do all the steps that we discussed, and I also run tests. So you can see that I run one, for example, Nutter test, and I have this test successfully passed as a part of my CI pipeline. When we talk about like the CD pipeline, so what I want to do, I want to make sure that my folder in staging is up to date, so I can run pipeline and I can specify actually the repo ID environment name here. So we can do it in multiple ways, right? But like you can manually like specify, let's say you have, staging, production, etc. You can specify for like just the name of the environment that you want to update your code in, and then basically take the newest version of the notebook from the branch that you're interested in and using Databricks repo API updated. So you can do this like leveraging Azure Databricks CLI, or you can, for example, use Databricks SH script to do that in a different way. And yeah, so like once this run, we will see the updated version of the notebook and our job, right? Like we'll use the latest version of the codes that we wrote. Also, I want to show like the library. So for example, for the CD, I need to specify Databricks repo Databricks token. We know how to generate this token. I already discussed it earlier. Databricks host, this is, you can copy it from the Azure portal. Cluster ID, that you can get it from JSON, from the cluster configuration. And the one thing that I believe I haven't mentioned yet, it's Databricks Repos ID for staging and for development. So if you will go to your Databricks repo, you will open the settings So you can see like how you actually make commit, and this is like where you can find a repo ID. You can copy that repo and use that repo ID as a part of your pipeline. Also for the demo purposes, like here, I leverage one workspace, but you know, in some scenarios, like you want to create maybe separate resources for development, separate resources and workspaces for like staging, right? So it's also possible to do exactly the same, leveraging just different hosts and leveraging different different Databricks hosts, right? And leveraging different tokens for Databricks and leveraging different Databricks repos IDs. So in this way, you can just add to the library different parameters and like do exactly the same steps to update the notebooks that you run in production to make sure that you update them in the cadence you want. Also, there is like a separate topic, like who has access to do that, right? Who can modify this folder? So usually it's not recommended that everyone has access to this folder, right? Like if it's different environments, different subscriptions, different resource group, like you can definitely manage the access. Also, you know, every developer has like the separate folder, but this kind of folders like should be updated only, let's say, from Azure DevOps or by running your pipelines and by running your pipelines. Okay, let me switch back to the slides. So we are using YAML, and I want to go back to our agenda for today. So today we review Azure Databricks resources. I show how you can create Databricks resources in Azure, right? How you can create clusters. After that, we review that like we can leverage Databricks repos and integrate it with Git. For example, in my case, I use GitHub integration, and I use the same code in Databricks workspace, in Databricks notebook, and also GitHub, right? So like everywhere has the same code, and I created branches to work on the features. I show you like the local development with Visual Studio Code and Databricks Connect, and we also discuss how to connect to data stores. I show you just example of how you can mount Azure Blob Storage, but there are multiple libraries how you can, for example, make and like write to like Azure SQL or like other types of data stores and like storages, and how to leverage different Azure services. We review Azure Key Vault, but actually, what is interesting that you can also leverage other services. In my project, I, for example, leverage Azure Databricks with Azure Data Factory, right? So, for example, with Azure Data Factory, you can build this like ETL pipelines that copy the data from, let's say, like on-prem, like do some additional transformation, store like some data in different like storages, etc. And one of the steps of that pipeline can be Databricks transformation, right? This is another solution, another service that you can, for example, leverage Databricks like with. And we also talk about CI/CD with Azure DevOps. I show how you can actually get access to your Databricks repo from Azure DevOps, and how you can update the code in the shared folders, not user folders, and make sure that they up to date, and you can leverage those jobs notebooks in your production pipeline, your staging pipeline. Like, we talk more about staging, but the same is applied for production as well. So this is like what we plan to discuss, and this is what we discuss. So if you are interested, and you want to learn more, please feel free to reach out. And now it's time for Q&A.
I guess we have already some in the chat from Roman, especially so you can like, but Margaryta, if somebody wants, maybe also can ask by voice, if it's okay. Or in the chat.
Yeah, let me open the chat now. So I see the question about libraries. So yes, you can install libraries, for example, with pip install, right? And in the notebook in itself, so no restart will be needed then. So what is the best way to connect to Azure Services from Databricks? Connect to SQL data. I want to connect from Databricks notebook to SQL database. Is it possible to send other files than source code from Databricks repos to the Git? So yeah, there are like multiple, like I work multiple times with and connected to SQL database, right? So you can definitely do that. There is like couple of connectors actually available. So for example, like recently I install, like when you go to the library, like you can install some additional libraries there. For example, for like Azure SQL, there is like, you can find like MS, I believe it's like MS SQL, Spark SQL connector, and it like I believe it was written that it's like writing 15 times faster with that connector that you install on the cluster. So you can, like, I tried that one. So you can definitely install or like use JDBC connection to connect to your SQL database. I will find and share the link to how you can connect to SQL database later on from Databricks, but this documentation is definitely available and with multiple optimizations. Is it possible to send other files like CSV, JSON code, then source code from Databricks repos to the Git? You definitely, so there is like a multiple levels of that question. So like you definitely can commit, like as long as you commit, those files, right? Like you can actually, let me open my folder here. So this is, you can see the different type of files, right? For example, I have like readme MD, right? It's not like Python, R, SQL, Scala, right? This is where I mentioned that in the user settings, you can actually enable to review the other types of files from here, right? But at the same time, I'm not sure it's like a good practice to, merge your data that you will work with to the Git, like even though you can do that, right? Like, for example, to keep like kind of like, I understand there is going to be some reasons like why you wanted to do that and like use CSV files from the repo and like from the notebook, but maybe you can like mount the data instead. Like if you're like worried about data versioning, for example, there is like other ways how you can version data. And I also would be happy to share the link there. Okay. There is a problem with using Databricks Connect. Then you want to use when you want to use dbutil secrets. Yes, like when you use dbutils, you have to be kind of like aware that that's why I use my like local development branch for that, where it's possible to enable it, why it's not enabled by default. I showed one way you can connect to Azure Services using Key Vault and store secrets, but yeah, like this is just the only kind of, it's not the only way, right? Like you can do that, and basically with dbutils is the only subset of dbutils is supported when you use Databricks Connect. And but you know, like I guess the dbutil secrets get should work. So that's why I kind of like need to try. There's some limitations there, but yeah, you need to try again dbutil secret get. But I'm not sure about like yeah, there is like
I'm sorry, may I add to this question?
Yeah.
When I tried the Databricks Connect from my local machine from the Visual Studio Code, there was actually the issue that I cannot use the dbutil secret get method because I was using the Databricks Connect. So that was the question about. So I just wanted to ask if it's possible to enable it, to use the dbutil secret get from the local machine, and why it's not like enabled by default.
Yeah, this is interesting because like I believe it should, right? Work. Maybe you can probably put you know, like I'm not sure about the not public key vault, you know, like
yeah, it's not public.
Yeah, so like you can probably maybe put both key vault and Databricks into like some kind of VNet, and I guess then it should work, but I haven't tried that yet. I can give it a try.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and about the testing framework, so this is like, it's kind of like depends what kind of like test you want to work, you want to write, right? So like if it's like integration test or like unit test, but basically, you know, like let me open this test again. So like here in the Nutter, right, like you test this like a separate kind of like function that you know, I have like the test notebook, but at the same time I test this Python function, right? So I haven't tried with the Synapse to use it, but like if you have any issues, it's an open source project. You know, you can feel free to raise that question there. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I want, like, if you have more questions, please also let me know and reach out. I want to thank you all for joining today. I also want to say huge thanks to Diana for organizing this first event. I know that it was like the first event, and I know that you continue to work on the similar events and similar formats. I believe there will be like more speakers who are willing to join and participants. So thanks a lot for like organizing this. This is a great opportunity to stay informed. And like, and also help our community to find the ways, like, you know, we all can support. So this is awesome. And I was happy to be the first speaker of the series. And I want to say huge thanks for joining me for in Monday for an hour. And the final words is like Slava Ukraini.